Johnny Carson revealed the 8 guests he loved most, and nobody knew about number 2. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was America's late-night companion. His desk was where the biggest stars came to be seen, where careers were made with a single nod of approval, where the entire nation gathered to laugh before bed. With his Midwestern charm and that knowing smile, Carson seemed to like everyone equally, professional, polished, the ultimate host who never let audiences see behind his carefully maintained curtain of cool reserve. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the audience went home, Carson kept a very private list in his mind of the guests who meant something more. According to Tonight Show staff who worked with him for decades, Johnny had clear favorites, guests whose dressing room visits ran long, whose bookings he personally requested, whose presence genuinely made him light up in ways audiences rarely saw. These weren't just professional relationships. Johnny was incredibly guarded about showing genuine affection, revealed longtime Tonight Show producer Peter Lassally in a rare 2010 interview. But there were certain guests where you'd see him backstage after the show, still talking, laughing in a way that was completely different from his on-camera persona. He'd personally call their agents to get them back on the show. With these particular people, Johnny wasn't performing anymore. He was just being himself. And that was the rarest thing in the world for him to share. In his final years, Carson became unusually candid about the guests who'd meant the most to him during 3 decades behind that desk. The names he mentioned, some obvious, others completely unexpected, reveal a side of Carson that millions of viewers never saw. A man capable of deep, lasting friendships forged in the unique intimacy of late-night television. Most surprising was his affection for the actress, whose vulnerability and emotional honesty touched something in Carson that even his closest Tonight Show colleagues didn't know existed. A woman whose presence transformed the usually guarded host into someone capable of showing genuine feeling on camera, and the comedian whose chaotic energy seemed the opposite of Carson's controlled style, but whom Johnny called the most naturally funny human being I ever met. These weren't just professional admiration or ratings-driven relationships. According to those closest to Carson, these were the guests he genuinely looked forward to seeing, whose presence transformed the show from work into something resembling joy, whose friendships extended beyond the curtain into his intensely private personal life. But first, we need to understand the guest who started it all, the performer whose very first appearance established a template for what Carson valued most in the people he invited into his late-night world.
In fact, I was at the studio gate tonight. It really was. Sit back, you got the job. Anyway, he's leaning forward like, is he going to leave Johnny now? Is he going to leave? If he leaves, you got problems, because I know. Who's going to move all those beer cans?
Number 8. Don Rickles, the insult comic who made Johnny break. Don Rickles was the insult comic who built a career on verbal aggression. His Tonight Show appearances were legendary for roasting everyone, including Johnny himself. Audiences loved watching the usually composed Carson get demolished by Rickles' rapid-fire put-downs. The dynamic seemed purely professional. Comedian does bit, host laughs, everyone goes home happy. What audiences didn't see was Johnny's genuine delight the moment Rickles walked backstage. Johnny genuinely loved Don Rickles, notes Tonight Show historian Stephen Cox. The affection went far beyond their on-camera chemistry. In the early 1970s, Carson personally requested Rickles be booked monthly, telling producers, "I need Don to make me laugh." It was an unusual directive for a host who typically let his talent coordinators handle booking decisions. When Rickles' show CPO Sharkey was canceled in 1981, Carson immediately called to invite him back, saying, "My show is your home." The gesture meant more to Rickles than any professional courtesy. It was genuine friendship extended in a moment of career disappointment. Staff documented that Carson and Rickles would talk for 30-45 minutes after tapings, with Johnny laughing harder than he ever did on camera. These weren't brief backstage pleasantries, but extended conversations where Carson's famous reserve completely disappeared. Producer Peter Lassally noted, "With Don, Johnny became a completely different person. The guard came down. They'd sit in Johnny's office just cracking each other up like kids." While Rickles represented the unfiltered honesty and comedic aggression Carson valued, his next favorite guest brought something entirely different: intellectual depth that allowed Carson to show a side of himself rarely seen on television.
Are you saying on another galaxy, it's not possible that there could be...
It's extremely unlikely that there would be creatures as similar to us as the dominant ones in Star Wars, and there's a whole bunch of other things. They're all white.
Number 7. Carl Sagan, the scientist who made Johnny wonder. Carl Sagan was the astronomer who made science accessible to millions. His Cosmos series captivated audiences with the wonder of the universe, presenting complex scientific concepts with infectious enthusiasm. On Tonight Show, he explained black holes and extraterrestrial life with the passion of someone genuinely excited to share knowledge. He seemed like an odd fit for late-night entertainment, a serious academic in a world of comedians and movie stars. Behind the scenes, Carson, an amateur astronomer himself, treated Sagan's appearances with unusual reverence. Johnny was genuinely fascinated by Carl Sagan, notes Tonight Show producer Fred de Cordova. He'd prepare for those interviews more carefully than any others. Between 1973 and 1996, Sagan appeared 26 times, more than almost any non-entertainer in Tonight Show history. Carson personally requested Sagan be booked whenever he published new work, treating these segments as personal opportunities rather than simply filling airtime. Staff reported Johnny would spend hours before tapings reading Sagan's books, preparing thoughtful questions that went far beyond the typical promotional interview. After Sagan's death in 1996, Carson wrote a rare personal letter to Ann Druyan expressing genuine grief, the kind of personal gesture Carson almost never made for professional acquaintances. Sagan represented Carson's intellectual side, the part of him that bought telescopes, read science journals, and wondered about humanity's place in the cosmos. Their conversations allowed Johnny to be genuinely curious on camera, dropping the comedian's mask to simply learn. While Sagan stimulated Carson's mind and satisfied his intellectual curiosity, his next favorite guest connected with his comedic soul, a master of timing, who made the difficult art of comedy look completely effortless.
Crass commercialism that brings me here. I enjoy talking to you, and
Oh, I know you do.
I'd rather talk at home, but this is the only place anyone can talk to you, so I have to... I have nothing to plug. I have absolutely nothing to plug.
Number 6. Bob Newhart, the master of timing who matched Carson's own. Bob Newhart was the deadpan comedian whose stammering delivery made America laugh for decades. His Tonight Show appearances were masterclasses in understated humor, with perfectly placed pauses and reactions that got laughs without obvious punchlines. Audiences saw two consummate professionals executing perfectly crafted comedy. The chemistry seemed effortless but purely theatrical, the product of two skilled performers who understood television timing. Off-screen, Carson considered Newhart the only comedian who matched his own sensibility perfectly. Johnny once told me that Bob Newhart was the funniest man in America, notes Tonight Show writer Pat McCormick. He meant it completely seriously. Between the 1960s and 1990s, Newhart appeared 87 times, one of the highest guest counts in Tonight Show history. What made this remarkable was Carson's unusual preparation. He personally called Newhart before bookings to plan segments, something he rarely did with other comedians. In 1987, when Newhart's show was struggling in ratings, Carson used his opening monologue to plug it, saying, "This is the smartest comedy on television." Staff documented that Carson and Newhart had standing monthly dinners in Los Angeles, often with just their wives. No industry talk, pure friendship outside the professional realm. When Carson retired in 1992, Newhart was one of only 6 people invited to Carson's final private dinner party. Years later, Newhart revealed, "Johnny once told me, 'You're the only person who makes me laugh without trying to make me laugh.'" That was the highest compliment he could give. While Newhart represented the subtle, intellectual comedy Carson admired most, his next favorite guest brought something entirely different: spontaneity and unpredictability that kept Carson constantly on his toes. Burt Reynolds, the perfect partner in crime. Burt Reynolds was the charismatic movie star whose mustache became as famous as his films. His Tonight Show appearances were legendary for their playful energy and unexpected moments. Water pistols hidden in jackets, shaving cream ambushes during serious discussion, engaged in friendly competition. The chemistry seemed built on mutual respect between Hollywood's biggest stars. What audiences didn't realize was that Reynolds understood the game of It's the game. Most guests don't, Carson reportedly told a producer after a particularly memorable Reynolds appearance. He comes to play, not just to plug a movie. There became recurring highlights that audiences anticipated. The famous shaving cream incident when Reynolds hit Carson in the face mid-interview could have been seen as disrespectful, but willingness to shake up the normally predictable talk show format. When Carson made quips about Reynolds' failed movies or high-profile romantic relationships, the actor encouraged the jokes rather than showing Hollywood's typical thin-skinned sensitivity. Staff reported that Carson and Reynolds would sometimes have drinks after tapings, discussing everything except show business, a rare crossover into genuine friendship. When nervous guests asked Carson for advice, he would tell them just relax and have fun with it, like Burt Reynolds does. Johnny had a test for whether he truly liked a celebrity, revealed a longtime producer. Could he tease them without them getting offended? Burt passed that test with flying colors, while Reynolds' next favorite guest represented something Carson valued even more deeply: connection to the comedy tradition that had shaped his entire career.
When I was an usher here, well, 12 years ago, I used to watch you all the time.
Really?
And you were my idol. And watching you do your show was like kind of going to school. And I started to emulate you. You know, pretty soon I was moving my hands like you do. And after a little while, I was even walking like you do. And before you know it, I was no longer an usher.
What happened?
They made me an usherette.
Number 4. Jack Benny, the master who taught Carson everything. Jack Benny was one of comedy's greatest pioneers, having mastered radio before conquering television. His Tonight Show appearances in the 1970s showcased timing that remained impeccable even in his late 70s and early 80s. The perfectly placed pauses, the subtle facial reactions, the ability to get laughs with just a look. On camera, Carson seemed appreciative, but professional during Benny's visits. Audiences saw a host interviewing a comedy legend with appropriate respect. Behind the scenes, Carson transformed into an appreciative student in the presence of the man who had essentially taught him everything he knew about comedy. Johnny's entire comedic philosophy came from Jack, notes a writer who worked with Carson during the 1970s. The idea that reactions could be funnier than actions, that silence could get bigger laughs than words, that was pure Benny. Carson once admitted to a close colleague after a Benny appearance, "He was the reason I do what I do. Watching him was my master class in comedy." That statement revealed depths of admiration Carson rarely expressed about anyone. During Benny's appearances, Carson would actually tell directors, "Make sure you get Jack's reactions, not mine," literally directing attention away from himself, something unheard of for a host who controlled every aspect of his show. Carson would position himself to give Benny optimal camera angles, breaking his own show's standard blocking to showcase someone else's talent. Carson kept a framed photo of Benny in his private office, the only celebrity picture he displayed in his personal workspace. During Benny's visits, Carson would laugh more genuinely, listen more attentively, and show a reverence rarely seen with other guests. Staff noted that watching Carson with Benny felt like seeing comedy history in real time, the current king talking with the man who invented the formula decades earlier. That photo said everything about who Johnny admired most, explained a longtime friend. Not the biggest stars of the moment or even his own image, but the man who had shown him what television comedy could be at its best. While Benny represented Carson's comedy lineage and artistic foundation, his next favorite guest brought something equally valuable but completely unexpected: the ability to make Carson drop his emotional guard in ways even his closest friends rarely witnessed.
Wasn't that fun last night?
Yeah, we were and Freddie and a lot of people.
No, just you and me.
Oh, no.
Number 3. Carol Burnett, the guest who brought sunshine. Carol Burnett was television's comedy queen, whose variety show had made her one of the most beloved entertainers in America. Her Tonight Show appearances were always highlights, filled with warmth and spontaneous laughter that felt genuine rather than manufactured. Audiences saw two comedy giants clearly enjoying each other's company. The chemistry seemed professional but warm, the kind of easy rapport between people who respected each other's talent. What audiences couldn't see was how completely Carson's demeanor changed the moment Burnett arrived. His shoulders would loosen, his smile would widen, and the invisible barrier he typically maintained would simply disappear. Carol brings sunshine to the stage, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon after one of Burnett's many appearances. The simple statement revealed depths of affection Carson rarely expressed. Carson allowed Burnett to go completely off script during appearances, even letting her turn the tables and interview him, something he permitted with almost no one else. Carson would frequently extend Burnett's appearances, sometimes bumping other guests to give her more airtime. When the producer would signal time to wrap up, Johnny would sometimes just wave them off if Carol was in the middle of a good story, a former director recalled. Staff documented that before Burnett's appearances, Carson would become noticeably more relaxed and cheerful, treating her visits as events to anticipate rather than simply slots to fill. Unlike most celebrity relationships that remained professional, Carson and Burnett maintained contact outside the show, occasionally having dinner with their spouses. Burnett would remember names of camera operators and makeup artists from years earlier, asking about their families, behavior Carson noticed and valued enormously. Carson would often reference Burnett's previous appearances when preparing other guests, using her as the example of perfect talk show behavior. With most guests, Johnny was clearly the host, and they were clearly the visitor, explained a director who worked on many of Burnett's appearances. With Carol, it felt like two equals just enjoying each other's company. The audience could sense that difference immediately. While Burnett brought warmth and authentic friendship that made Carson visibly happy, his next favorite guest touched something even deeper, a vulnerability and emotional honesty that penetrated Carson's legendary reserve in ways that shocked even his closest colleagues.
Every night in Las Vegas, I would leave the stage and John would come on and he would say, "When Emmett Kelly dies, that girl is gonna come into some fabulous wardrobe."
Number 2. Bette Midler, the diva who made Johnny cry. Bette Midler was the brash, outrageous, divine Miss M who brought Broadway energy to television. Her Tonight Show appearances were explosive performances that lit up the stage with big voice and bigger personality, musical numbers that felt more like concert events than simple talk show segments. She seemed like pure entertainment, professional dynamism that audiences loved. On camera, Carson appeared to appreciate her talent the way he appreciated all great performers, with professional respect and genuine enjoyment. What audiences couldn't see was the emotional connection Midler created that penetrated Carson's legendary reserve in ways almost no one else could. Bette Midler touched something in Johnny that almost no one else could reach, notes Tonight Show producer Peter Lassley. She made him feel, not just laugh. In the early 1970s, Carson personally championed Midler when she was relatively unknown, booking her repeatedly and telling NBC executives, "This woman is going to be a star." Staff noted that during Midler's musical performances, Carson would watch from off-stage with visible emotion, highly unusual for his controlled demeanor. For his second-to-last Tonight Show episode on May 26, 1992, Carson specifically requested Midler, considering her presence essential for that milestone moment. The legendary performance came that night when Midler sang "One for My Baby" and "One More for the Road" directly to Carson. Cameras captured him wiping away tears, one of the most emotionally honest moments in 30 years of television. After the performance, Carson and Midler embraced backstage for several minutes, with staff reporting Johnny was openly weeping, something crew members had never witnessed before. In one of his final interviews, Carson called that moment one of the most moving experiences of my professional life. Years later, Midler shared what Carson told her backstage that night. "You're one of the few people who reminds me why I love doing this." Midler represented emotional authenticity in an industry built on manufactured personas. She could make Carson drop his guard completely, accessing genuine feeling in a man famous for emotional containment. Nobody expected Bette Midler to be the person who could make Johnny Carson cry on camera, revealed a former Tonight Show director. But she had this ability to reach past all his defenses and touch something real. That performance on the penultimate show became iconic because audiences witnessed something they'd never seen, Johnny being genuinely, undefensively moved. Carson's connection with Midler went beyond professional admiration into emotional vulnerability. She wasn't just a guest Johnny loved, she was one of the few people who could make him show genuine feeling on camera, revealing a depth of emotional honesty that shocked even his longtime staff. While Midler touched Carson's heart and revealed his capacity for genuine emotion, his final favorite guest represented the deepest connection of all, a friendship so profound that it transcended the professional world entirely and became one of the most important relationships of Carson's life.
Welcome to our first...
You know what I'm doing? I'm changing the tempo of the show.
Number 1. Carl Reiner, the friend who knew Johnny's soul. Carl Reiner was the comedy legend who created The Dick Van Dyke Show and became one of entertainment's most respected figures. His Tonight Show appearances were masterclasses in sophisticated wit and storytelling, conversations that ranged from comedy craft to Hollywood history to personal philosophy. On camera, he and Carson had chemistry that seemed built on mutual professional respect between two giants of comedy. Audiences saw intelligent conversations between industry legends who clearly admired each other's work. What audiences never suspected was that Carl Reiner was the closest friend Johnny Carson had in show business, the only person who knew the real man behind the desk. Carl Reiner was Johnny's best friend, not just favorite guest, notes Tonight Show producer Peter Lasalle. Johnny trusted Carl with things he'd never told anyone else in the industry. In the early 1960s, Reiner and Carson bonded during Carson's early Tonight Show years when both were establishing themselves. Unlike other industry relationships, this one started before Carson became untouchable, creating a foundation of genuine equality. Throughout the 1970s and 1990s, Reiner was part of Carson's exclusive monthly dinner group of only 5 to 6 people, the only regular social commitment Johnny maintained. This wasn't networking, it was friendship. Reiner was one of the few people allowed in Carson's dressing room before shows, a space usually kept sacrosanct. Staff reported hearing genuine laughter from behind the closed door, not performance laughter, but real joy. During Carson's painful divorces, Reiner was the person he called late at night. According to Reiner's own accounts, Johnny would talk to me about feelings he couldn't express to anyone else. Carson would send Reiner comedy material for feedback before using it on air, treating him as an equal creative mind, something he did with virtually no one else. Reiner appeared 93 times between 1962 to 1992, one of the highest totals in Tonight Show history. Carson personally requested him for important milestone shows. For over 20 years, Carson and Reiner played tennis every Saturday morning when both were in LA, a ritual Carson protected fiercely from industry intrusion. After retiring in 1992, Carson remained notoriously reclusive with most of Hollywood, but he maintained regular contact with Reiner, having lunch together monthly in Los Angeles. In a 2010 interview, Reiner revealed the depth of their bond. Johnny once told me, "You're the only person in show business who knew me before I became Johnny Carson, and you're the only one who still sees me." I understood what he meant. Everyone else related to the icon. I related to the person. What made the Reiner-Carson friendship unique was its foundation outside professional necessity. Reiner didn't need Tonight Show appearances for career validation. He was already a legend. Carson didn't need Reiner for ratings. Dozens of guests could have filled those spots. They simply enjoyed each other's company in a way that had nothing to do with television. After Carson's death in 2005, Reiner gave a rare interview revealing the emotional depth of their bond. "When Johnny was dying, I was one of the few people he wanted to see. We didn't talk about his legacy or Tonight Show. We talked about our kids, our lives, the things we'd laughed about over 40 years. He told me, 'I'm glad you were there for all of it.' This wasn't just Carson's favorite guest. This was his best friend. The relationship encompassed everything Carson valued: intelligence, wit, loyalty, discretion, and genuine connection without industry politics. Reiner knew Carson before fame made him guarded, stayed close through 3 decades of Tonight Show, and remained his friend when Carson retreated from public life entirely. The depth, duration, and intimacy of this friendship surpassed every other relationship on this list. When Johnny Carson, the man who trusted almost no one, was dying, Carl Reiner was in the room, and they didn't talk about television or legacy. They talked about 40 years of genuine friendship, the rarest thing Carson ever found in Hollywood. These weren't just Carson's favorite performers. They were the people who made him feel something beyond professional satisfaction. Genuine connection in an industry where authenticity was rare. Carson's willingness to express affection for these guests revealed the vulnerability he spent 30 years hiding. That he could name people he loved showed growth in a man famous for emotional containment. The guests Carson loved most shared a quality. They made him forget he was performing and remember he was human. Which of Carson's beloved guests surprised you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look at Johnny Carson's private affections, subscribe for more untold stories from late-night television history. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.